Baba knows the way. For Joseph Baba Ifa, Baba knows the way. We follow the signs. He walks with the Orisha through sacred lines. He speaks with the ancients. He honors the drum. He carries the wisdom where we all come from.
Hey family, thank you for tuning into Our Roots podcast with Joseph Baba Ifa. We're only the strongest roots see the light, brought to you by Botánica candles and more. And if you haven't yet, hit that subscribe button. Phil the podcast doctor, what's up, brother?
Hey, what is going on? Happy Sunday. How's life, man?
Everything's everything, man. God is good.
Yeah.
Studying, raising these kids, man, family, working, lots of good stuff.
Yeah, man, I'm happy to be here. It's always a pleasure when we record the show. And guys,
Sure.
Make sure you drop a like and share this podcast episode. We passed 150K, man.
Yeah,
So
oh my gosh.
that's a huge milestone.
Phil, let's really take a moment for that, man.
Yeah.
150,000 human beings care about Ifa. And
That's
that is
amazing.
the most humbling, comforting thing, to be a source of information and guidance, especially when we're living in such a turbulent time from a social media standpoint. We're within the information age, and for people to know that they can get authentic, not only presentation, but literature and resources here, that's very, very satisfying. So I'm just thankful to 𝗀𝗶𝗍𝗲, to my wife, to you, and the significant role that you've played as well, and just getting us to this point. It's really uncharted territory, so we're winging it, the best way we can.
Yeah, and AI has not taken over yet. So this is authentic Joseph Baba Ifa for now until the AI channel takes over. So, But guys, don't forget to join our membership program if you are wondering. If you want more Joseph Baba Ifa, real simple, hit that join now button right in the bottom of this episode, and it gives you access to 3 separate tiers. Each different tier offers different perks, whether it's early releases to episodes, private episodes, private lives just for you, discounts on merch, discounts on courses, you name it. So hit that join now button. So what are we talking about today?
Today, we're going to be going over a concept that I think is very pertinent now within the Ifa and Orisha community in general, and the concept is hierarchy.
Hierarchy. Okay,
Yeah.
all right.
So,
Top down or bottom up?
Both ways.
Okay.
It's unilateral, if that's applicable. The reason I want to go over this is because when you look at the Yoruba culture by nature, it's very respect-driven. But I think one of the most refreshing things about it was both ways. Respect from elders to minors, minors to elders, and kind of going over the different concepts and odus that corroborate it. So really, to begin this topic, we have to go right to the beginning, and we're going to start with Baba 𝗍𝗶𝗍𝗍. 𝗍𝗶𝗍 says, respeto a los mayores, respect your elders, right? It's one of the bases of society, civilization. This is key, because ideally one day we will be there, and we want to receive the same respect we gave, ideally. When we look at this odu, though, 𝗍𝗶𝗍𝗍 was the youngest of the 𝗃𝗍. We finished our 𝗃𝗍𝗍 series as we delve into, the omoluos and whatnot, but somehow, no matter what odu we delve into, somehow it leads us right back to 𝗍𝗶𝗍𝗍, or the source. So 𝗍𝗍𝗍𝗍 was the youngest of the 𝗃𝗍s, and Olodumare was going to have a banquet where he was going to give each of them their position, ultimately, as well as their blessing. So the 15 elders were going to arrive punctually, but 𝗍𝗶𝗍𝗍, in this case, wanted to do a little preparation, and he had divination performed for him, where his own odu of 𝗍𝗶𝗍𝗍 was revealed, where Ifa said he needed to perform sacrifice before heading to Olodumare's palace. Now, this was a little bit of an issue because it was going to cause him to get there late, but he was always obedient of Ifa, because he was always characterized as being a very punctual guy. So he performed the ebo, and he started heading out. And somehow Eshu is playing a role in this. He's kind of guiding how the situation's going in the palace, how things are going with 𝗍𝗶𝗍𝗍, the obstacles he's facing. He's really trying to make 𝗍𝗶𝗍𝗍's arrival, very precise. So, mind you, the banquet's happening. They start eating without 𝗍𝗶𝗍𝗍, which is very disrespectful. And Olodumare actually provided this huge, beautiful fish for them to all eat. This is why, on any of the major consecratory tables, the fish is present. And they all started going for, the mass, right? The parts of the fish that, are most delicious. But they ignored the head. And one of two things occurred. There's various versions of the story, but there's one version where when 𝗹𝗶𝗍 arrived, they started laughing at him. And they said, yo, you showed up late, you look how you look. This is for you. And they kind of threw the head at him, And they say that the one that was most condescending towards him was Babalawo, along with his brother 𝗹𝗶𝗸𝗲. They were each at the point. Being that 𝗃𝗶𝗸𝗁 was the oldest and 𝗃𝗲𝗿 was going to be the heir apparent to being the king of the 𝗃𝗍. So 𝗹𝗶𝗍 took the head and started eating it. So Olodumare comes in and sees everybody full, picking their teeth, looking good, and he sees 𝗹𝗶𝗍. And he looks at 𝗹𝗶𝗍 and he said, man, that's an interesting choice for an entree. And he said, well, I'm very appreciative of you inviting me. I know I'm the youngest here. Not much is expected of me, but, forgive my tardiness. I had some things pending from a reading, and, this is what was left for me. So I'm very appreciative. Thank you for allowing me to be here, Father. And Olodumare just looked at him and couldn't believe the character and humility and integrity. And he said, you're it. You're king. And Ofumeyi looked at him and said, what do you mean? He's the youngest here. There's no way. He said, he has to be the one. It's kind of like in the movie Gladiator. It must be you, Maximus. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
He was the least corrupt. He was the most pure, And 𝗹𝗶𝗍 said, but why specifically? He said, well, you ate the head, so head you shall be. You had the most humility. You ate the specific part that mattered. And I think it's time to kind of switch the table up a little bit. So, in some versions he kicked Ofumeyi out, in some versions he kicked 𝗃𝗶𝗍𝗁 out. But basically 𝗹𝗶𝗍 sat at the head and 𝗃𝗲𝗿 was at the other end. And till this day, they can't be around each other without having somebody in the middle. So when you look at 𝗹𝗶𝗍, it says respect to the elders, right? But 𝗹𝗶𝗍 wasn't the elder. He was the youngest, right? But he was always respectful. He didn't disregard the other people's age, but at the same time, he didn't allow the other people's age to interrupt his own process, because this Odu says age is to be considered. It's not something to be ignored. You're supposed to respect people's age. It's like the Odu Odiekun says, like 𝗹𝗶𝗍 says, se respeta la cana. You should respect gray hair, right? But at the same time, it's not only about how many years you have, it's about what you've done with those years. And this is a pretty big concept now, because a lot of people like to focus on, I have 10 years of Santo, 20 years of Ifa, 30 years of no sé qué. But they really haven't done much. Now, mind you, that's okay, because age is to be respected. But when we're talking about in a professional space, we need to be talking about professional themes. And to be able to discuss something professional, you have to have prepared yourself. So there's a big difference between the doctor who's 50 years a general practitioner and the surgeon who's been 10 years in the trenches in the ER. It's not that we don't respect the guy with 50 years, but he can't talk to the surgeon. The same way you can have a Babalawo, 12, 15 years of Ifa who hasn't learned absolutely anything. And that's okay. But that doesn't mean those years matter more than the person who in 9 to 10 years has dominated a space. So that's what 𝗹𝗶𝗍 says. And Olodumare himself said this is the way we need to interpret it, because he could have said, yeah, 𝗹𝗶𝗍 is the youngest. He doesn't, deserve anything. But Olodumare looked at his efforts. He looked at his character. He looked at his pedigree. He said, this is who I need to lead our people, And the reason 𝗹𝗶𝗍 was rewarded is because the same respect he gave to the elders, even though they were disrespectful and frankly, he should have put his hands on him. He had good character and said, I'm going to occupy my position and let nature take its course. So the same respect he gave to the people who didn't deserve it was the same respect they now had to give him, because he went from being the youngest to the eldest. So that's why 𝗹𝗶𝗍 says respect your elders, because even in moments when he was being condescended upon, he never broke character, right? So that's a key point there when we're talking about hierarchy, because, you know, it's to be recognized, you know, just surviving is to be recognized and applauded. You know, remember that más sabe diablo por viejo que por diablo. The devil knows more for being old than for being the devil. So, you know, for anybody that's been able to survive in a hostile environment for a long time, that person is wise and they need to be analyzed for sure. When you see an old man in a young man's game, you need to learn how that guy played the game to be able to make it there, you know, Hall of Fame, you know?
Yeah.
So that's one aspect of hierarchy. Now there's another aspect when we go to the other side of the gambit, and we go to Babalawo 𝘃𝗶𝗱𝗲, right, who at one point was the king of the 𝘃𝗍s. He was 𝗀𝗲𝗹𝗁𝗍's preferred son, and he ended up being last amongst the 𝘃𝗍s. Huge slice of humble pie. So the story goes that, you know, Babalawo 𝘃𝗶𝗃𝗍 was the heir apparent. You know, he was 𝗀𝗲𝗹𝗁𝗍's favorite son. He was Odu's favorite son. He was everybody's favorite. But he was a favorite because of the impression he gave to his parents or to the people he thought, you know, could sway the public opinion about him. But amongst his peers, he was intolerable. He was a despot, a tyrant, an egomaniac. Arrogance doesn't even begin to encompass, you know, his behavior or his, you know, characteristics or character. But for the most part, he was able to get away with it for the longest time because his parents had a blind eye to his true character. But someone who didn't have a blind eye towards that, apart from all the other 𝘃𝗍s and signs, was his youngest brother, 𝗹𝗶𝗸𝗍, right? And 𝗹𝗶𝗸𝗍 knew that if Oragun, or 𝘃𝗶𝗍𝗶, his nickname, being that he, you know, came from the land of Ila Oragun, as it's known, he knew that if Oragun persisted in this position of influence, the world was doomed because no one could support this tyranny any further. And apart from that, Oragun really hadn't put in the work to be viewed or respected as this figure. You know, he was a procrastinator. He didn't study. He really wasn't a leader. He was more of a boss, where 𝗹𝗶𝗍𝗶 had much more leadership qualities and characteristics and charisma to really lead into the future. And 𝗹𝗶𝗍 saw this about himself. Even though he didn't allow arrogance to pollute himself, he knew that he was the better option, you know, based on the needs of the people rather than his own ego, which is what motivated his oldest brother. So the story goes, being that Oragun says we have to respect our minors, we have to respect our, you know, I don't like to use the word inferior, but, you know, our followers, however disciples, however children, you know, Oragun stipulates this. And, you know, there's so many stories, you know, that we just spoke about the story where 𝗹𝗶𝗍𝗶 replaced him at the table. It really made him angry. Then there's the other story of when, once again, 𝘃𝗶𝗃𝗍𝗶 showed all of his shortcomings by being late to his crowning ceremony, where 𝗀𝗲𝗹𝗁𝗍, who was blind, said, you know, I want you here at noon to crown you, you know, be here on time because I know you have a bad habit of procrastinating. Your punctuality's off. I need you to start refining these characteristics so that you can be king of the universe and kind of facilitate everything for me because I'm tired. So Oragun said, yeah, and he was recognized because 𝗀𝗲𝗹𝗁𝗍 would rub his back and feel all the hair on it. He had a lot of follicles. So that's how he would recognize him. So 𝗹𝗶𝗍𝗶, seeing what happened, decided to perform divination, and his own Odu was revealed, where Ifa said he needed to perform sacrifice to Olokun. And the sacrifice in this case was going to be a goat. Sometimes it's interpreted as a bull. I lean towards the goat. And when the sacrifice was performed, he gave the head to Olokun out of a sign of respect, being that Olokun was going to facilitate him being king. And he put the skin on his back, you know, the bloody skin, but the hair facing outwards. And he showed up punctually at the time that 𝗀𝗲𝗹𝗁𝗍, you know, stipulated. Maybe it wasn't noon. It was probably 4 in the morning, whenever sunrise is, I guess. And when he showed up, he kneeled and said, Father, this is your son, 𝗃𝗶𝗃𝗍𝗶. I've come to receive what you're going to give me. And, you know, 𝗀𝗲𝗹𝗁𝗍 was elated because he said, wow, son, you arrived on time. You know, we're going to be able to kick this off right. I'm so proud of you. And he put his hands on his back and knew that it was actually Oragun, based on the hair, and said, whoever my hand is on is the king of the universe. And just like that, the Big Bang. So, you know, 𝗃𝗶𝗱𝗏 is now, he's sitting high. Things are going great. He's punctual. He's organized. He's charismatic. He's a leader. He's not bossing people around. He's not mistreating people. 𝗃𝗶𝗹𝗁 shows up late, and he kneels in front of 𝗃𝗲𝗿𝗏 and says, Father, I'm a little bit late, but, you know, I'm here for what you said you were going to give me. And when he touched his back, he felt the hair again. He said, how unappreciative could you be? How ungrateful could you be? Get out of my house. I already gave you everything I could. Like, how dare you? And 𝗃𝗶𝗹𝗁 was perplexed, but 𝗃𝗲𝗿𝗏 was yelling at him, and he left, and he was crying, and he ran into the Orisha Babalawo. Babalawo heard what was going on and said, let's go back and investigate what was going on. And Babalawo went to 𝗃𝗲𝗿𝗏 and said, why do you mistreat your son? He's simply here to get what you promised him. He said, the problem is I gave it to him already, and he's coming back. 𝗃𝗲𝗿𝗏, like, I don't understand where his mentality is. So they say that Babalawo looked over and saw 𝗃𝗶𝗱𝗏 on the hill, wearing the white cloth, and the other maids were celebrating that he was king now and all these other things. And he saw that 𝗃𝗶𝗱𝗏 still had on his back the goat skin. And he said, is it possible that 𝗃𝗶𝗱𝗏 came and said he was Oragún just to trick you into giving it to him rather than Oragún? And 𝗃𝗲𝗿𝗏 said, even if he did, though, I said whoever my hand is on, that's the king. I can't take it back now. And Oragún was weeping, and he said, the problem is now you've lost all your position because everybody has their spot, and you got here last. So, and 𝗃𝗲𝗿𝗏 even had a moment of self-awareness where he told Babalawo, he said, maybe this is for the best because this guy shows up late everywhere. He's not motivated. He's not trying to accomplish anything. Like, you know, his brother took it, but it was probably for the best. So they can call 𝗃𝗶𝗱 whatever he wants, but he's probably the reason all of this is able to be. So you have something to learn. So Oragún went from being number 1 to number 16, which is at the time the only spots that existed, because this is before the 𝗃𝗍 started interloping and creating other combinations. So Oragún says, respect your minors. Respect, you know, those below you, right? Proverbially, based on rank and hierarchy. And why would it say that, though? Because at one point, Oragún was the elder, and all of a sudden, he became the youngest. He became the lowest in rank. So the same disrespect that he gave everybody based on his arrogance of position was the same one he received when he now occupied the smallest position. So it goes both ways. It's really wild how Ifa kind of flips it, you know, and it speaks so methodically. But it's a lesson that, you know, positions change all the time. And you need to be careful how you treat people. You need to be careful to follow protocol and understand that today it's you, tomorrow it's me, but it should always be us, you know? So those are the first fundamental concepts of hierarchy. But there's other things that fall into that. You know, there's other aspects I want to delve into, like what happens when hierarchy is disrespected, what happens when protocol is disregarded. If we reference the Odu 𝘃𝗍𝗿𝗏 or 𝘃𝗶𝗱𝗏𝗏, it is where the position of 𝗃𝗏 was born. The word 𝗃𝗏 literally means king, right? Or he who takes, 𝗃𝗏, right? So it is applicable within Orisha, which is the most common way it's termed, but it's also applicable within Ifa. There is an 𝗃𝗏𝗏, right? There is a director of ceremony within Ifa. And ironically, 𝘃𝗶𝗱𝗏𝗏 says that the first 𝗃𝗏 was a Babalawo. And that the position of Oriate derives from that within the context of the Erindilogun shell and ceremonies of the Bodo or room of Orisha or crowning. But in 𝘃𝗶𝗱𝗏𝗏 was where 𝘃𝗶𝗱𝗏𝗏 was identified as the Oba of Ifa, ceremonially, as far as direction. So basically what was going to occur was the first itefa, celestially. They were going to initiate a Babalawo. They were going to initiate somebody, right? So the 𝗃𝗍 were there, right? 𝘃𝗶𝗱𝗏𝗏 was there. He was identified as the Oba. And, you know, there were other people. You know, there was a couple Babalawos, brothers, etc. And yeah, the Ifa kicks off, right? So from the very beginning, 𝘃𝗶𝗱𝗏𝗏 was having friction specifically with the 𝗃𝗍, right? Being that they were the 16 kings and they were elder and had more time and all these other things, he was in contrast with them consistently because they were trying to throw their age around or trying to, you know, undercut him or circumvent his decisions or anything. Mind you, 𝗃𝗲𝗿𝗏 had selected 𝘃𝗶𝗶𝗶𝗶 specifically for this process, even though at this point in the Ifa, he was the youngest Babalawo directing all these people. So when the point of 𝗃𝗲𝗍 came, specifically to be able to unravel the 𝗃𝗲𝗹𝗁 that had revealed itself and the brothers were supposed to speak, 𝘃𝗶𝗶𝗶𝗶 says the 𝗃𝗶𝗸𝗶 speaks last and eats first. So when they're in 𝗃𝗲𝗍, you know, the 𝘃𝗍s are speaking out of order. 𝘃𝗶𝗶𝗶𝗶 is trying to close out 𝗃𝗲𝗍 and speak as the 𝗃𝗶𝗸𝗶 should. They're interrupting him, you know, all these different things. And literally, the Alawo is looking like, I don't understand anything that's going on right now. And the 𝘃𝗍s started losing their ability to speak and all these different things. It was a complete disaster, right? It wasn't benefiting anybody. And then, when they got to the table, 𝘃𝗶𝗶𝗶𝗶 was at one point, and 𝗃𝗶𝗹𝗶 was at the other, because they said 𝗃𝗶𝗶𝗶 was doing the Ifa. And 𝗃𝗶𝗹𝗶 said, the 𝗃𝗶𝗶𝗶𝗶 was like, who eats first? And 𝗃𝗶𝗶 says, I do. I'm the padrino. And 𝘃𝗶𝗶𝗶𝗶 looked and he said, my brother, based on divine law and what 𝗃𝗲𝗍𝗁 has stipulated, I'm actually the one who's supposed to eat first. And 𝗃𝗶𝗹𝗶 got into this big thing. 𝘃𝗶𝗶𝗶 stood his ground because he knew, even though he wasn't older than 𝗃𝗶𝗶, what his position stipulated. And 𝗃𝗶𝗶 didn't know as much Ifa as 𝘃𝗶𝗶𝗶. So, being that 𝘃𝗶𝗶𝗶 speaks of literally the box of knowledge for anybody that's seen that pataki. So now they had a really big issue now, because now the table couldn't finish and it was getting a little gangsta, and they were like, okay, so how are we going to be able to resolve this peacefully? Because these men, you know, there's a lack of order that's happening, right? The hierarchy, the ranking, you know, Ifa is militant to a certain degree, where each position has to be defined clearly so that we can avoid situations like this. So 𝗃𝗲𝗍𝗁 unfortunately had to be interrupted to be able to settle the issue. And when he said, 𝗃𝗶𝗶𝗶, what is your problem? 𝗃𝗶𝗶 said, well, I don't understand why I eat after this guy if I'm the one doing the Ifa and I'm older than him. And I don't understand why he gets the last word in 𝗃𝗲𝗍 if I'm the one doing the Ifa and I'm older than him. And 𝗃𝗲𝗍𝗁 said, because that's the way it is. The 𝗃𝗶𝗸𝗶 is the 𝗃𝗶𝗶 is the 𝗃𝗶𝗶 is the 𝗃𝗶𝗶. You're being respected. You're the godfather. You know, you have your prestige. The issue is you're trying to come into conflict with somebody who holds a divine position that I have stipulated, and you're trying to go to war with me. So this is the reason why the Ifa is going upside down. You guys are so focused on ages and all these other things. You guys have not studied and prepared yourself to be in the position that this gentleman is in, regardless of his age, regardless if you guys saw him be born or initiated, or if you guys were at his Ifa. This is the guy that's taking you to victory right now, and that you need to follow and listen to get to a successful end here. Because what you're not understanding is, by you persisting in this immature behavior, the ayewos and the ajoguns and the yamio shoronga and eshu is polluting this to the point where you're not going to finish, and it's going to cause destruction. So either you get in line and have some humility and accept that you haven't put in the work that this gentleman has, or it's going to be a complete implosion. So 𝗃𝗶𝗶 and the 𝘃𝗍s had to bow down. The 𝗃𝗶𝗶 is the 𝗃𝗶𝗶 is the 𝗃𝗶𝗶. The same way in Ifa, the same way in Orisha. There's nothing worse than you being in a ceremony and you have somebody that might be frustrated, that might not have had teachers, that might not have the literature, that is consistently trying to challenge everything that's being said. I remember when I received 𝗃𝗲𝗃, and maybe I knew a little more about 𝗃𝗲𝗃 than I should have. My godfather, 𝘃𝗶𝗃𝗃 was directing it. And, you know, this person is an absolute master of ceremony, a complete gentleman, elegant to the umpteenth degree. He's an idol, you know. And I remember when I finished it, it was one of the first interactions we had was actually when I was receiving that deity. And I remember in ceremony, you know, he said, you didn't say much. You didn't have any questions or anything like that? I said, oh, Padrino, I had 100 questions. But you can't ask questions in war. Like, right now, we're at war. You know, we're doing this process to help me, you know, to avoid the negativities and all these different things. I don't ever want to be misconceived as challenging you or questioning you in front of the troops. I would never do that, you know. And he realized really quick, and he appreciated it. And mind you, after that, I bombarded him with questions. Once the ceremony was done and we were alone as Godfather and Godson, and we talked, and I was able to get fabulous information. But I knew my place. I knew my space. I knew my perimeters and parameters, you know, out of love and respect for him for all that he was doing and all of the brothers were doing. But war is not the moment to ask questions. War, pick up a gun, you know. But that comes from a place of humility and acceptance, you know. Regardless of what anybody knows, allow people to function and then pick up the pieces later. But unfortunately, we're living in a time in Ifa and Orisha where there's so much frustration. And I really don't understand why, because if you're somebody that's okay with initiating and not really delving into mythology or study, have the self-confidence of prestige of your position, because all you do is lower it once you try to project your frustrations upon others, being that you don't want to put in the work they did. And that's why 𝘃𝗶𝗱𝗲𝗁 came out unscathed from that interaction, and he was applauded by all the other signs, specifically the 𝗃𝗶𝗸𝗲𝗍. And the 𝗃𝗍𝗍s kind of got this reputation of trying to rely on their age or stature rather than their efforts. And at the end of the day, hard work trumps talent every day. Ask Michael Jordan. You know? Just that perfect combination. But what's respected is when someone asks you to do something that they already know how to do. So that's why ceremony kind of functions within that regard. So, you know, whenever in ceremony, because if someone's directing something, it's because they have an aptitude that maybe the other ones have not, you know, achieved yet or don't want to incorporate yet. You know, if it's always great to learn from the people that are guiding us towards a successful end, but always be sure to pick spots, you know, and kind of identify and be self-confident to know, hey, I've learned what I want to learn. I don't want to go through what that brother's gone through to be able to recollect that much information at a moment's notice. Respect, you know, and then the ceremonies that I've been able to accommodate and coordinate, you know, there's been brothers there with 30 years, 35 years, 40 years, 17 years. Everybody's older than me. At the end of the day, I live my sign. I'm 𝗃𝗏𝗃𝗏. The boy will be amongst kings. So this Odu, you know, or that situation, when you come with humility and you come with respect and you understand that we're all men here, you know, it leads to a really beautiful situation and nothing but, you know, admiration and acceptance. You know, thank you, Joseph. And the same way I reciprocated, thank you, brother, for the opportunity. At the end of the day, whoever's in that position is here to serve. The 𝗃𝗏𝗍 is not here to come in here and disrespect people, mistreat people, undermine people. That can lead to really negative situations. You know, a couple people have gotten handled because of that. You know what I'm saying? You come in, and even if this guy doesn't know, you know, Orula versus Orisha, he might have other skills that, you know, could really embarrass you. So, you know, everything is humility, regardless of the position you hold, and understand one such as that is that of servitude to the brothers, to the padrino, to make everybody look good and everybody have a harmonious situation, right? So that's very key. That's why ultimately age is trumped by preparation, even though age is to be respected. Now, mind you, there's perfect examples of when protocol and hierarchy have been undermined and disregarded. And there's a perfect example in the Odu of Baba Okanameji. Okanameji, apart from being one of the 𝗃𝗍𝗍s that embarrassed himself in the Ifa with 𝗃𝗶𝗍𝗍𝗍, as such was somebody that thought he knew more than everybody. And because of it, you know, it led to a lot of prepotence and people not really assimilating him well. He was an uncomfortable brother. And Olodumare was going to have a council with all the Babalawos ever, all the other Odus. And he went for divination where his own Odu was revealed, where Ifa told him to perform sacrifice and to accommodate the process, to not try to impose himself, not try to embarrass anybody, not try to act like he knew more than he did. Because by nature, Okanameji is somebody that has never put efforts necessarily into study. It takes a lot of effort for that Odu to kind of get those juices flowing and really allow that intelligence and that knowledge to flow through their spiritual brain. But he completely disregarded what the Babalawo said. He didn't, and this paperwork, this pataki is actually in Ifadida for anybody that's doubting its legitimacy. Mm-hmm. And he didn't perform at Bo. And when he arrived in the council, he completely disregarded what his awos had told him. He didn't allow the younger Babalawos to speak before him. He tried to undercut all of the elders, you know, specifically the 𝗃𝗍𝗍s that were ahead of him. He completely tried to dominate the space to impress Olodumare, when Olodumare could quickly see he wasn't prepared. And then apart from that, he was disrespectful. He completely disrespected the hierarchy of 𝗃𝗲, which is a process. And he thought that he had made this great impression, and everybody was like, wow, great job, brother. You're doing a great job. And as soon as he left, he immediately felt the effects of his transgression. He was cursed by his peers. Actions were taken. Olodumare shunned him. He wasn't invited anywhere. He never practiced Ifa with anybody else. He was starving. He was hungry. He was impoverished. He was a complete disaster. So one day, with the last $3 he had, he went and visited the Awos again, and his Odu of Okanamei was revealed again, where he was furious because he's like, why am I going through this? You know, I have good intentions. I'm right. They're wrong. Why am I going through this? And, you know, unfortunately, the Babalaos had to look at him and say, you couldn't be any more wrong. But the worst part about it is that you don't even realize it. You don't realize that you didn't listen to Ifa. You never learned how to do ebo. You never offered ebo. You disrespected every Babalao you ever met. You disrespected every spiritual woman you ever met. And because of it now, you are ostracized. And they're not going to let you back in. So the story goes that, unfortunately, Okanamei lived in solitude. You know, there are versions where, you know, he tried to make peace and things like that, but that ship had sailed because he had been so disrespectful and actions had been taken already that couldn't be brought back from. So it's a perfect example of why we have to follow protocol. Today we're young, tomorrow we're elder. You know, today we're in this position, tomorrow we're in that position. But the best thing to do, or the best way to win the war, is by knowing your position and playing it perfectly. Some of the best experiences I ever had as a Babalao was being my godfather's right hand, being his number two, learning as much as I could, prepping the room, doing the processes to the best of my ability. You know, it was really, I don't know if the Japanese concept is called igikai or something like that, like where you do everything to the best of your ability. You know, if you're mopping the floors, you mop the hell out of those floors. If you're, you know, feeding 𝘃𝗶𝗱𝗏, you sing till your horse, your voice gets hoarse. Like you do every process to the best. Like for a brother drummer, if you're on the 3 right now and you're on 𝗃𝗶𝗃𝗏, you be the best 𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗏 anyone's ever seen. And that's how you gain those respect and get those runs and those stripes so that you're recognized by the brothers and sisters to be able to be exonerated and elevated to the position that ultimately 𝗃𝗶𝗱𝗏 says we're going to arrive at based on our efforts. 𝗃𝗶𝗱 says the hierarchy of Ifa is defined by the efforts and sacrifices of the person towards their goals. So if you work hard, you're going to achieve the apex of your profession and of your craft. So that's very key. But ultimately, you know, there's a bunch of different things that go into hierarchy. For example, you have positions that are debated now, like the position of aleyo. The word aleyo means visitor. It means somebody who is not protected or belongs to a house. But once you receive hand of Ifa, you belong to that house. So Rumila recognizes you and has rebirthed you. There's been some debates and things like that as to, you know, what roles can an aleyo play while he's trying to incorporate himself in a house. And ultimately, it's pretty difficult up front, you know, because you can't do anything in the room. You can't interact too much with things that are coming in and out of the room, but you can facilitate and support this process, whether it's, I need you to go get this, or, you know, can you do this for me? You know, things that, you know, like, for example, you're not on the court yet, you're the ball boy, but that's okay because one thing leads to another. But you have to perform this role well to be able to, you know, be a star on the court. But it's not that we completely eliminate people either. We just put them in a position to succeed where we're able to, you know, facilitate their goals without delving into taboo and sacrilege. But for anybody to be like, you know, the uninitiated person has no place whatsoever within Ifa, well, how do we know if we want to initiate them or not? You know, if I ask somebody to do something before their initiation and they don't do it, you know, within reason, I don't want to initiate them, because if you can't go pick up a bag of ice on the corner or go get me that rooster, I'm not going to expect you to have the fortitude to sacrifice the rooster or direct other people or be a part of this team. Everybody has a role to play. There's even a position within the room known as awo atemaki, which means the priest who, you know, doesn't salute the tray, which means that, you know, he really doesn't have at that moment a lot to apport towards 𝗃𝗲 or towards the ceremony. But even he has a role to play. Just because you're not speaking or speaking in volume doesn't mean that there's other functions that can't be performed. Like, not everybody's going to be the person that speaks the most or has the best interpretation, at least at that moment. Even, you know, people who pride themselves or specialize in interpretation, everybody has an off day sometimes. You know, things just aren't hitting, or you're not meant to be the star at that moment, but you're meant to be a part of the team, and it's all about the W. So the team concept is super key, especially when it comes to hierarchy, because the protocol is what maintains that towards a successful end. When we talk about hierarchy in general in the religion, especially when we're talking about positions and priesthood and all of these different things, you know, a great 𝗀𝗲𝗿 to cite is 𝗵𝗶𝗸𝗶𝗍 or 𝘂𝗶𝗶𝗍𝗁, and it speaks of when the Babalawos were known as 𝗍𝗏𝗏, and based on them being known as 𝗍𝗏𝗏, the elder Orisha priests would not salute them as representations of Orunmila on earth, even though they had very good character and they were very humble. So Orunmila was becoming very frustrated with this because he noticed that, you know, his sons weren't receiving the prestige that they deserved based on their sacrifice to manifest him. So he went, divination was performed, 𝗂𝗶𝗶𝗍𝗁 was revealed, sacrifice was performed, where they put on the 𝘃𝗶𝗱𝗍, kind of like this one, right? And he changed their title from 𝗍𝗏𝗏 to Babalawo, which means father of the secrets. That's why from the moment of initiation, a Babalawo is a father of secrets. He is a figure. He is somebody that should be respected. Now, obviously, that's in conjunction with good behavior and being elegant in the way we express ourselves and treat others. But that's why it says, regardless of how much time someone else has in another priesthood, such as Orisha, at the end of the day, Orunmila was a recipient of homage from all the Orishas that those people were initiated into. Ergo, the Babalawo, the touching of the floor, etc., regardless. You know, and you hear a lot of different opinions now and things like that, like, oh, does the Babalawo still throw himself to his elders of Orisha? And 𝗂𝗶𝗍𝗏 says he should not. And a lot of the old school santeros really weren't a fan of that. The madrinas and padrinos, etc., the ones who really understood the protocol and the ramifications of that. Like a Babalawo throwing himself to an Orisha priest, at least within the Lukumi tradition, is very taboo based on this 𝗀𝗲𝗿 of 𝗂𝗶𝗍𝗏. Like, I even tried to kneel in front of my godmother multiple times, and she would tell me, please don't ever do that again. Now, mind you, obviously, she'd never throw herself to me, nor would I allow it, because I loved her. And, you know, there's no reason. You know, we just hug and, you know, we'd keep it moving. But it's all about understanding, you know, the rights and positions of each. The same way, the 𝗀𝗲𝗿 says that the Babalawo respects the position of the Oriate within the room of Orisha. That regardless of hierarchy, elders, all of these different things, everybody is equal based on their room and their position. So the Babalawo has to take into account all that the Oriate is stipulating within his room to be able to get to a successful result, which is ultimately the birthing of said Orisha. So whether it's somebody that is uber initiated and has 100 years within their position, or somebody that's just trying to get started, everybody has a role to play. The most important thing is knowing the ramifications of that role, listening to your elders as they groom you and you work towards your fulfillment and your goals and your results, so that, you know, always the prestige is maintained, and most importantly, the unity and fraternity of Ifa and Orisha is as well. So that's the importance of hierarchy.
Okay.
Here we go, brother.
Yeah, well, you know what time it is now?
Oh, man, the members.
That is right. I'm thinking, trying to find this other one here.
You know, I love my jazz elevator music, but
yeah. Oh, wrong one.
We throwback. Run it back.
There we go.
Hey.
I had to find this one.
We might have to start using the drums sometimes with the members. That's
yeah,
funny.
we could. Yeah, we could. All right, folks. Real simple. Join our membership program.
Yes.
It's really easy to do. All you have to do is click on that video, right? The button right under the video. It says join our membership program, and it will give you access to 3 separate tiers. And that gives you extra shows, live shows just for you, early releases on podcast episodes, discounts on merch, discounts on classes, and so many other things. So I'm going to talk about the newest of the new. These are the newest supporters here.
Love it.
So we got Bella Blackish
Oh.
at 2 days.
All right.
We got AK the Lioness
Nice.
at 2 days.
Welcome.
We got Polito D for life
Okay.
at 4 days.
Okay.
We got the Lock Doula at 6 days. We got Kateri Ram at 9 days.
Wow.
We got the Snake Man
Okay.
at 10 days. Trevor Akeem at 10 days.
Thank you.
and Israel Alex Banales at 18 days.
I tell you, that's how you know we have no buyer's remorse, because usually within those first 2 weeks, you know whether you want to stay or not. So we're happy you're still here. You're the best part of the channel. Let somebody know about it that you think could benefit from it, and be sure to communicate what it is that you want given to you guys within the membership, so we're giving you that ultimate value. Bunch of great things going on all the time, guys. We have classes going on. Hit up the website to be able to sign up. Apart from that, we have the workshop in the works for you to be able to interact with us and go through an intense Ifa 48 hours, you know, to refine those skills and grow within our community. Botanica.candlesandmore.com is up and running for all service and product needs. We're shipping. If you can't catch us on YouTube, be sure to listen to the podcast on any of the audio outlets, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Apple. Be sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe. A big thank you from all of us here at Our Roots Podcast. And until next time, see the light.
Baba Joseph showed the path today. Baba knows the way, we follow the signs. He walks with the Orisha through sacred lines. He speaks with the ancients, he honors the drum. He carries the wisdom where we all come from.